just over 100 years ago, a peculiar institution existed in our country. It was called slavery, a vicious system under which 1 out of every 5 Americans in the South was owned by another human being. Even though Americans, black and white, had fought and won a glorious revolution under the banner of freedom and justice for all, there was still to be no freedom, no justice for these millions of African Americans, men, women, children, a people stolen from their distant homeland and shipped like animals to do forced labor for masters who all too often treated them like animals. It was on a Maryland plantation around 1818 that Frederick Douglass was born a slave.
A, B.
When he was 8 years old, he was sent to work for a well-to-do family in Baltimore.
Very good, Fred. Go on.
For a brief period, young Frederick Douglass had an unusually kind mistress. She decided to teach the boy to read.
K.
What in God's name do you think you're doing?
You didn't mean any harm.
If you give a nigger an inch, he will take a mile. If you teach that nigger how to read, there would be no keeping him. It would forever ruin him to be a slave. We carried you here to take care of Thomas. You'll learn a trade when you're bigger. Ain't no need for you to be reading, boy. No need at all.
Frederick Douglass learned an important lesson that day. Knowledge is a key to freedom. He taught himself to read, often without anyone even realizing what he was doing. But as he grew older, there would be other lessons to learn. Knowledge by itself was not enough protection against the brutality of the slave system.
Get up!
A 2-hour-long battle with the slave breaker, Colby, was a turning point in Douglass's life.
You mean to resist me, a scoundrel? Yes, sir.
He had learned another very important lesson. Colby, the feared slave breaker, never whipped Frederick Douglass again.
I want you for my husband.
Frederick Douglass met Anna Murray. They fell in love.
Tomorrow, Master also wills. I can be sold and shipped 1,000 miles from here. Anna, I shall not marry you as a slave.
Then I reckon you should go up north. Got some belongings I can sell. Enough for the New York train.
Anna.
Douglass's escape from slavery was successful, and Anna soon followed him to Massachusetts. He quickly joined a movement that was committed to the destruction of slavery. Its supporters were called abolitionists.
I resolved then that whatever power I had should be devoted to the freeing of my race.
My friends, have we been listening to a thing, a piece of property, or to a man? Will you allow this man to be carried back into slavery?
He found himself in the company of brave men and women, black and white, under the leadership of William Lloyd Garrison.
I don't believe you've met Mr. Garrison.
I'm honored, sir.
I was deeply moved by your address. You have a great gift, Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison.
You say you never had any formal schooling?
No, sir.
Not even after you escaped?
No, sir. I've been teaching myself ever since I was a youngster.
Amazing.
Impressive. Really is.
Mr. Douglas, Mr. Collins and Mr. Raymond and I were just discussing your becoming an agent for the society.
traveling as a lecturer, if you will.
Mr. Garrison, I've hardly the ability to
Oh,
speak on...
nonsense. You speak with full conviction and authority.
No, Senator Calvary. No slavery can offer. No human contract nor agreement can save the accursed system of human bondage from the death and decay to which God and nature have doomed.
For many years, Douglas and Garrison traveled throughout the free states and territories, though it meant endangering their own lives.
Sorry to disturb you like this. I should have known it. The very thing we were afraid of has happened. But we never dreamed the reaction would be this great. Your book, my dear fellow. You've named your masters. You've marked yourself for the fugitive catchers, my dear man.
Douglas wrote his autobiography, revealing names and places, although this meant a greater risk to his life and freedom. The book was an instant success, not only in America, but in Europe as well.
You've talked of taking our message to Great Britain.
Yes.
This seems a propitious time for such a journey, giving time for this trouble to blow over.
Frederick, Mr. Garrison may be right.
Slavery is the common enemy of all mankind.
Douglas fled to England. For 2 years, he traveled and lectured throughout Great Britain and Ireland. Wherever he went, he was welcomed with open arms.
To expose it to the light of heaven, aye, to the heat of the sun, that it may burn and wither out of existence. That is my reason for coming to this country.
His fiery speeches won many of the English people over to the abolitionist cause. British friends put up the money to buy his freedom. When he returned home to America, he was no longer a slave.
I like this.
With the help of English supporters,
Thank you very much.
Douglas started an anti-slavery newspaper in Rochester, New York. He called it the North Star.
Rosetta, please have the door, please.
Yes, Papa.
The paper was named after the same star that guided thousands of slaves on their dangerous journey from the South in search of freedom.
Papa, it's Mrs. Tubman.
Harriet!
Some, like Harriet Tubman, risked their lives many times returning south to lead hundreds of people off the plantations.
Ooh, a warm stove is sure a welcome sight.
The Douglas home and printing shop often served as a welcome station stop on the Underground Railroad.
I'm so honored, Mrs. Tubman. I've heard so much about you. Even in England, your work is known.
I'm just an old lady that loves doing a lot of walking in the great outdoors.
And she's fond of bloodhounds, too.
One of Douglas's closest comrades in the struggle against slavery was a man named John Brown, a man who would lead the historic and daring raid on Harper's Ferry, West Virginia.
Seize the town?
Yes. First, we'll capture the army arsenal. Then we'll hold the leading citizens hostage until the slaves are freed.
John, you know I have supported and will continue to support you in all of your other efforts. But my dear friend, this scheme is doomed to failure. This is the wrong place. This is suicide, John.
Whether we live or die, this deed must be done.
Shields, for the love of God.
Mr. Douglas, I believe I'll go with the old man.
Both men were right. The raid on Harper's Ferry sent shockwaves throughout the nation. But as Douglas had predicted, it cost John Brown his life. The Civil began. The peculiar institution of slavery had split our country apart, North against South, brother against brother, dividing families in one of the bloodiest conflicts in mankind's history. Douglass recruited black soldiers, worked tirelessly for the Union cause, and vigorously supported President Abraham Lincoln, though he was not always in agreement with the president's policies.
Mr. President, the Negro soldier is willing to fight and die in this great war. But he must receive some sign from this administration that he simply isn't exchanging one form of oppression for another.
Mr. Douglas. If this administration goes too far, we will bring down upon ourselves all of the hatred that is felt toward the Negro. This would greatly hinder our ability to successfully conclude this war. For we, both of us, have much to gain in this regard.
Eventually, the Union was preserved, and most importantly, the chains of slavery were at long last cut from the arms and legs of millions of African Americans. But unfortunately, the end of slavery, emancipation, did not mean the end of oppression, hatred, and violence.
But Papa, President Johnson said...
Rosetta, I fear Andrew Johnson is no friend to the Negro people.
Frederick, you mean we've been suffering all these trials for all these years for nothing?
Without the vote, liberty's a mockery. The Negro will no longer be a slave to an individual master. He will be a slave to society and at the mercy of the mob.
Though the Douglas home in Rochester was burned to the ground,
it is the spirit of
the
hate.
family escaped unharmed.
Spirit of murder. Spirit that would burn a family in their beds. But one thing I know, and that is, there is no middle ground for us. We must either have all the rights of American citizens, or we must be exterminated. For we shall never again be slaves.
President Hayes appointed Douglas U.S. Marshal for the District of Columbia. He and his family moved to Washington. In 1877, he purchased a new home. He called it Cedar Hill.
Do you like it, Anna?
It's beautiful. Maybe a mite too grand.
Well, President Hayes wouldn't have the United States Marshal for the District of Columbia living in a log cabin.
Mr. Lincoln lived in a log cabin.
In 1882, Anna Murray Douglas died after a long illness.
Fred, you must be terribly lonely now with Anna gone.
Harriet, Anna was the anchor of my life for 40 years. But I have Rosetta, Charles, Louis, Fred, and I have my work.
I hope this is hot enough for you.
Thank you, Rosetta. Thank you. Miss Pitts?
Yes, Miss Douglas.
I understand you enjoy bars, that's so?
Very much, Mr. Douglas.
Perhaps you wouldn't mind accompanying me to the concert tonight.
Sometime later, Douglas decided to remarry. His bride was Helen Pitts.
I'll have to get back to my correspondence.
The interracial nature of the marriage caused national debate. This controversy reached into Douglas's own family.
Papa, I speak for the entire family. How could you do such a terrible thing?
Rosetta, is it so terrible for an old man to seek comfort of a loving wife? We all have the right to follow the convictions of our hearts. If I were not to marry Helen simply because she happens to be white, go to my grave a self-accused and self-convicted moral coward.
Even in old age, Douglass retained his deep commitment to freedom's cause. He remained a passionate spokesman for human rights for all people.
Mr. Douglass, how would you sum up your involvement in the women's cause?
When I ran away from slavery, it was for myself. When I advocated emancipation, it was for my people. But when I stood up for the rights of women, self was out of the question. And I found a little nobility in the act.
Well spent.
Hello, Mr. Douglass.
Hello.
I'm Martin Andrew. I heard you speak last week at Mount Olive.
Oh, yes. That was an inspiring affair.
Can I talk to you for a moment, Mr. Douglass?
Well, Martin...
Sir, you lived in the old days when our people were slaves. And in the new times, both. But it seems like all those rights that we're supposed to have won are being taken away from us. What advice would you have for a young fella like me who wants all people to live in liberty and justice?
Agitate, Martin. Agitate. Agitate.
It is February 20th, 1895, the day on which Frederick Douglass will pass away. His courageous fighting spirit, his dedication to the cause of human rights and freedom live on.
Agitate.
If there is no struggle, there is no progress. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one. And it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. I had little hope. It never did. Freedom of the slave never will. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress.
Why did you invite me here to speak on this occasion? To mock me?
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? They have neither ears nor hearts for the appeals of justice and humanity. Slavery is the common enemy of all mankind. One of those monsters of darkness to whom the light of truth is death. Let us never forget that justice to the Negro is safety to the nation.
Tell me how long.
Only a few years ago, we were a discouraged people because we were the first to lose our jobs when Old Man Depression came along and the last to get them back. We struggled vainly to regain our bearings while depression, fear, and failure stalked the nation. 1/10 of the population of the United States, we formed as a race over 1/6 of the unemployed. 1 out of every 4 of us was on relief. In vain, we sought for something to restore our confidence, our hope, our courage. Without jobs, we had no money. And without money, we could not purchase food for the hungry mouths at home. Our only hope lay in charity. Hunger drove our people to the bread lines. Anxiously we waited for some sign of better days. Then came the federal government's work program. One by one, it took us out of the bread line. It gave us a new chance to take a normal place in the life of our community. It made us self-supporting. It changed the haggard, hopeless faces of the bread line into faces filled with hope and happiness, for now we work again. Unskilled laborers, the forgotten men of past generations, now work steadily at decent wages. The nation over, they're building and repairing schools, public buildings, community centers, and airports to meet the changing needs of our modern world. In one project at the nation's capital, 1,200 men are employed in improving Bowling Field, grading, constructing runways, building hangars, and administration buildings. In addition to the hundreds of unskilled laborers who were removed from relief roles, many skilled workers are employed in this important improvement project. Hundreds of homes have been freed from the bondage of poverty as their breadwinners find security and hope in their new jobs. In New York City, a WPA housing demolition project is underway, which will greatly improve the living conditions of families of moderate means. In many other cities of the country, old tenements and fire traps are being torn down to make way for modern buildings containing comfortable sanitary apartments. At Colonial Park in Harlem, as in many other congested areas, WPA workers have constructed a huge swimming pool and are now completing a bathhouse which will accommodate 4,100 persons. In this construction project, skilled workers are employed, utilizing the knowledge of their trades gained in the days before Depression. Swimming pools are particularly valuable to the community because they offer a haven of relaxation to young and old during the hot summer months. At the same time, swimming pools remove children from the crowded city streets, providing every safeguard to prevent such tragedies as were all too common to the old swimming hole. Typical of the park improvement projects underway all over the country is another feature of the improvement program at Colonial Park. A wading pool has been built by WPA workers in which the youngsters may splash to their heart's content. New additions to the playground area have been made possible by the grading and improvement of parts of the park which were formerly merely decorative. Even the youngest children find plenty of opportunities for play under watchful supervision. In many parts of the country, nursery schools have been established where almost 10,000 children of our needy families are provided with hot meals, supervised play activities, and excellent preschool training under competent instructors removed from relief roles. In these projects, employment has been provided for 600 teachers, nurses, dietitians, and cooks. At the other extreme of age, more than 300,000 adults have learned to read and write for the first time in their lives. Eagerly they study, realizing how very much a little knowledge can mean in our modern workaday life. Teachers drawn from relief roles instruct them in useful subjects such as arithmetic and foreign languages. In Harlem, where a large part of the population is from Puerto Rico and Central and South America, a knowledge of Spanish is valuable to workers, shopkeepers, and others. In this class, elementary instruction in the spoken language is given by native teachers. In cooperation with the National Youth Administration, 26,500 young men and women are employed as instructors, laboratory assistants, and clerical helpers. Thus, they are enabled to continue their education. Clerical white-collar workers find employment at filing and checking important records, at typing, and at such unusual occupations as abstracting and filing time-worn land records. so that they may be available for the use of future generations. As part of the program of rehabilitation and the conservation of human resources, a number of household training schools have been established by WPA. In these schools, girls from relief families are prepared for domestic work which will make them self-supporting. Others take the course in order to learn the arts of homemaking for use in their own homes. In modern kitchens, under competent instructors, the girls are taught to cook and to prepare salads and other delicacies which add much to everyday meals. Here's where you may be able to learn something. This is the way the girls are taught to make beds, an art which few have mastered. These household training courses have already sent hundreds of girls out into the world, well equipped to secure domestic positions and able to command skilled workers' wages. Health education is an important part of the WPA program. At a number of health centers in large cities, qualified instructors teach groups of women first aid methods and the proper care of children. The care of the sick is also taught by trained instructors at health centers throughout the country. These projects which you have seen are part of a broad national educational program through which WPA has helped millions of children and adults. In a number of communities, sewing rooms have been established in which are employed women who are the breadwinners for their families. Here, garments are made for distribution to needy families. Musicians and singers, too, found employment in orchestral and vocal groups. These art singers, organized and directed by William Lawrence, have successfully presented a great many programs of classical music.
In spite of miracles, fields are gay, a bird is free. From nature will have all things should rejoice in the spring. La la la, la la la, la la la, la la la, with joy begin the spring. With joy begin the spring. Then, lady, little you appear in new delight. I will their favor first and day, for cheerful they will sing. La la la, la la la, la la la, la la la, more cheerfully will sing. More cheerfully will sing.
One of our greatest contributions to the world of music is the spiritual, recognized the world over as a fine example of the folk music of America. This choir, directed by Juanita Hall, presents our traditional music in all its beauty.
Eagles all wheel, way up in the middle of the air. Eagles all wheel, way in the middle of the air. You run my face, and think they run my face. Go wheel, little wheel, way in the middle of the air. Eagles all wheel, way up in the middle of the air. Eagles all wheel, way in the middle of the air. You run my face, and think they run my face. Go wheel, little wheel, way in the middle of the air. Oh, you see, that sister dressed so fine. She ain't got religion on her mind. Way up in the middle of the air, Eagles all wheel, and way in the middle of the air. And the little run my face, and the big wheel run my grace. Goes wheel, little wheel, way in the middle of the air. Oh, you see, those little wheels, way up in the air. Oh, wheel, and the way in the middle of the air. Oh, the little wheel, and the big wheel. Oh, wheel, way in the middle of the air. Oh, you see, those little wheels, way up in the middle of the air. Oh, wheel, and way in the middle of the air. Oh, the little
Under the Works program, musicians, artists, writers, and actors contribute their share to the cultural development of the community. The Negro Theater Unit of the Federal Theater Project produced a highly successful version of Shakespeare's immortal tragedy Macbeth, which far exceeded its scheduled run in New York and was later sent on a tour of the country. The scene was changed from Scotland to Haiti, but the spirit of Macbeth and every line in the play has remained intact. In this contribution to the American theater and in other projects under the Works program, we have set our feet on the road toward a brighter future.
And I care not if thou dost for me as much. Fear not, till Burnham Wood do come to Dunsinane. And now a wood comes toward Dunsinane.
Arm and out! There is no flying hiss, no tearing here. I begin to be weary of the sun, and wish the estate of the world were now undone. Ring the alarm bell! Come, Rock! At least we'll die with harness on our backs. What's he that was not born of woman? Such a one am I, to fear or none.
Let me find him fortune. Tyrant, show thy face. I cannot strike at wretched turns, whose arms are hired to bear their staves. If thou beest slain and with no stroke of mine, my wife and children's ghost will haunt thee still.
What is thy name? My name's Macbeth.
Turn, hellhound, turn!
Of all men else I have avoided thee, but get thee back. My soul is too much charged with blood of thine already.
Then yield thee, coward, and live to be the show in the gaze of time. We'll have thee as our rare monsters are, painted upon a pole, and under it, here may you see the tyrant.
I will not yield. Though Burnham would be come to Dunsinane, yet I will try the land.
I have no way.
Lay on, Macduff. Let there be he who first cries, hold enough. Thou losest labor, for I bear a charmed life which must not yield to one of woman born.
Spare thy charm, and let the angel whom thou still hast served tell thee Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped.
Accursed be the tongue that tells me so. And be these juggling fiends no more believed.
Hail, King! Behold, where stands the usurper's cursed head. The time is free. All hail Malcolm.
Peace! The charms wound up.
Let's go! Take them man horses out!
Squadron Messenger. Fires is launched at First Squadron Messenger. The target is launched at 0900.
Very well. Report back to your squadron commander.
Progress through education and industry has a new meaning today. To progress, we must win this war. To win this war, we must have machines and the brains to direct these instruments of warfare. We need the trained minds of millions of specialists. Our American colleges and universities are responding to the call for trained manpower. Education is speeded up. Courses are being geared for war. Like many other American colleges, Tuskegee Institute in Alabama has been graduating qualified flyers for some time. The United States Army Air Forces stationed at Tuskegee's fields hold classes on the campus to teach the fundamentals of ground school. Tuskegee shops prepare students for jobs in aviation plants. The work of Dr. Carver is well known. While at Tuskegee, he has contributed much to the science of nutrition and is now using his talents and his knowledge in the war effort. Other Tuskegee scientists are also working to improve diets at home. Using an improved process, these scientists get more alcohol from the plentiful sweet potato than ever before. Many courses, like this automotive maintenance class, are given to women who learn to fill jobs vacated by men gone to war. Prairie View, one of the state colleges of Texas, is designing courses to supply trained men and women to the increasingly technical fields of industrial and military service. In the agriculture department, students study the operation and maintenance of farm equipment. Methods of increasing important farm products and the study of animal husbandry are part of this program. A forging class learns how to make machine parts and tools, so difficult to get in wartime. Many will get jobs in war plants. Well-equipped machine shops in the mechanical department teach these young men how to make the materials so vital in our war effort today. The demand for trained specialists is increasing. Jobs are opening in all parts of the country, and these college departments help to meet the shortage of manpower. Colleges everywhere are adding new courses for war training and are putting new emphasis on old ones. For example, here at Howard University, located in Washington, D.C., this class in mechanical designing trains men and women for jobs in the plants that make our tanks, guns, and machines. This meteorology class teaches future flyers celestial navigation, the science that guides our planes to their objectives and safely home again. Many laboratories are now specializing on war materials, and classes like this teach students the chemistry of powder and explosives to train them for positions in munition plants. Testing machines try the explosive force of new powders. Howard University Medical School has speeded up training to furnish doctors and nurses for the fighting forces. One of the country's leading authorities on blood plasma shows students how to determine the gravity of plasma to be used in the war zones. In the College of Liberal Arts, this class studies the economics of war. Many graduates fill jobs in the accounting departments of war plants and government agencies. Hampton Institute, located on the banks of Hampton Roads, Virginia, is practically on a 24-hour basis, training hundreds of war workers. The president's home was an old plantation house. Here, one of the country's great educators welcomes foreign students who are sent to learn American customs and culture. Students studying building construction and architecture built most of the buildings on Hampton campus. One of the special war courses is in radio operation and construction. Here, students learn to operate communication centers and thus prepare for specialized duties with the armed forces. Hampton's war program is more than that of trades. Here, a class in chemistry assists an instructor who is doing much research in the development of new war material. Science students are preparing themselves as laboratory technicians and work on special studies for the United States Public Health Service. This student is testing for bacteria in food caused by handling. Because of the urgent demand for trained nurses, Hampton is cooperating with nearby hospitals by providing classroom and laboratory training. Several graduates of ground school classes like this are now flying with the United States Army Air Force Pursuit Squadron at Tuskegee. Others are serving as instructors in other college airfields. While turning out war materials on contract, these students are training to take their places with the nation's skilled mechanics. Step-up courses are offered to men already in war industries, as well as to students, to meet the demand for skilled workers at the nearby shipyards, where more ships than ever before are sent down the ways. Hampton's Agriculture Department has added a course in farm management for women. These girls are planting corn on the college farm as they learn to operate farm equipment. At the student-built dairy farm, girls watch an expert milk a cow. One of the most significant fields of the war program is the study and work in nutrition. Much research has been done with the use of soybeans as a substitute for meat and milk, so important at present when we are conserving these foods for war purposes. Since the war began, many radio programs have been sent over Hampton Station giving the results of research, ways to improve diets, to raise better crops, and how to do our part to win the war are broadcast to thousands of families within reach of this station. Students take a course in surveying and topography to aid them in Army training. The Institute Regiment has been in existence since 1868, when Hampton was founded. Cadet uniforms are made by students in the college tailoring classes. Many of Hampton's facilities are now being used by the armed forces. Selected men throughout the country are sent for training as Army motor mechanics. After the 3-month course, these men are usually sent back to their posts in charge of repair crews. Army trucks from nearby camps are soon put in order. The first class in specialized training is now given in Hampton's engineering department for hundreds of men in the United States Navy. Thousands of men and women of these colleges over the nation are now taking their places in our war effort, physically and mentally fit.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. But I have a dream today.
The man who said, "I have a dream," to 200,000 Americans in 1963, was assassinated in 1968. Since Dr. Martin Luther King's death on April 4th, the United States has been in shock and mourning. Only now are Americans beginning to recover from the impact of his tragic death. The following are some of the sorrows, some of the tributes paid to his memory by his countrymen during the last number of days.
At 7:10 this evening, Martin Luther King was shot in Tennessee. This was to be a gala occasion for a little Negro college from Mississippi appearing in Carnegie Hall with the great Duke Ellington. Martin Luther King, 20 minutes ago, died. I would like to take this opportunity to ask Reverend John Genzel, who is the jazz minister, to lead all of us in prayer for Martin Luther King and the future of all civil rights movements. Would you please rise? The King is dead. Long live the King of Love throughout eternity.
I think it can be said that he now stands with our other American martyrs in the cause of freedom and justice. His death is a terrible tragedy and sorrow, first of all to his family, to our nation, and to our conscience.
My fellow citizens, and especially my black brothers and sisters in our city, this is Walter Fauntroy, Vice Chairman of your City Council and Director of the Washington Bureau of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. There's no one in the city tonight who is more stunned, whose heart is more crushed or broken by the tragic events of the night that have robbed our nation and our world of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. It will be very difficult for us tonight and in the days and weeks to come, all of us, to deal with our deep sense of grief.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
Martin Luther King, if he had one choice, I am sure, if he had one choice in his death, it would be that we made a greater effort in this country by adhering to the principles that he so ably advocated of nonviolence, that we make now a greater effort, the theory of nonviolent effort, to eliminate the obvious inequalities that still exist between white and Negro citizens, and that we provide in an affluent and wealthy and magnificent white America an equal opportunity for the Negro citizens. There's not going to be any replacement for Martin Luther King Jr. anytime soon. He was the leader and now the martyr of the whole civil rights crusade, which has been the most important domestic issue of this century in America.
It may be that out of the ashes of this awful tragedy, that a new dawn can break. It depends on each of us. It may be that the prophecy that Dr. King once made may come true when he said, "We now stand in the midnight of our existence, but I see a new dawn coming."
I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream.
To paraphrase Winston Churchill, if we have resolve, we can convert this moment of the nation's greatest shame into our finest hour. The only thing more tragic than the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would be that the only response would be black anger and white sympathy.
You can kill a man, but you cannot kill an idea. And the idea and the ideal for which Dr. Martin Luther King stood, for which he lived, and for which he died, will continue to live in this country, will continue to live in this city. And despite the sorrow under which all of us today feel so heavy, there will on the morrow be a resurgence of the confidence that he was right and that we will overcome.
I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
The candidates for the presidency of the United States expressed their grief that night in statements to the American people. Senator Eugene McCarthy called Dr. King's death a tragedy for all Americans. He said that not only had the Negro people lost a noble and great leader, but all Americans had lost a man of peace. Former Vice President Richard Nixon paid tribute to Dr. King as a man determined that the American Negro should win his rightful place alongside all others in his nation, and at the same time, a man whose life was devoted to the principle of peaceful, nonviolent change. George Wallace, former governor of Alabama, called the assassination a senseless, regrettable, and tragic act. And Senator Robert Kennedy, recalling the death of his own brother, paid homage to Martin Luther King as a man who died in an effort to dedicate his life to love and to justice for his fellow human beings.
I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
But the nation's sorrow was not only echoed in the spoken words of leaders. Most of all, the sorrow was in the millions of faces, faces of all colors and of all religions, who gathered together to mourn his death. The faces of those who would continue to believe in his dream.
confidence he exuded were as if he knew something the rest of us didn't know. It was the composure that marks a man who knows who he is, what he believes, and how much he's willing to give for those beliefs. Martin Luther King, deep faith in God, in the people of this land, black and white, who were God's children, and the victory that would come. All of these were the well springs of that serenity. And that calmness and tranquility were a blessing to our land.
I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. But I have a dream today.
No words of mine can fill the void of the eloquent voice that has been stilled. But this I do believe deeply. The dream of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. has not died with him. Men who are white, men who are black, must and will now join together as never in the past to let all the forces of divisiveness know that America shall not be ruled by the bullet, but only by the ballot of free and of just men.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not
And in Memphis, the night before his death,
I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
following the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, most of the nation grieved. But there were those who did not grieve. There were those who used death as an excuse for the winning of luxury and the game of destruction. Their motive was neither grief nor hunger. Their numbers were small, but damage was not. Negro leaders publicly deplored this looting and violence. Roy Wilkins, Executive Secretary of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People.
What discourages me and dismays me and disheartens me is that in the reports so far coming in, we have reports of looting, not anger, not violent outbreaks, not an expression of their sorrow and resentment at the killing of Dr. King, but utilizing this as an opportunity to steal things. Now, I think Martin's memory is desecrated by this kind of action.
Most were satisfied with small items, but a few were overly ambitious, curious perhaps like those who try to fit a huge stereo set into a small car.
I wouldn't want every young black person to take the rap for a few of those ones.
Entertainer, Sammy Davis Jr.
But I would simply say to all young people, particularly my black brothers and sisters, that the man stood for something very special in a world of violence. He was struck down by violence. Our adding to it, no matter what our frustrations, no matter what our anger, what our justifications might be. And it becomes thievery when the carnival atmosphere that Mr. Wilkins talks about does prevail. And I don't see sad faces mourning the tragic loss of this great American. I see people laughing and giggling. I somehow want to disown those people. I don't want to call those people who were laughing less than 48 hours after our leader died and stealing. Those are not really brothers. Those cannot be the people who are striving for the dignity that we should have at this point.
The Reverend Wyatt Walker, a close friend and associate of Dr. King since the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement.
As difficult as it was for those of us who are civil rights figures, I'm afraid to say leaders or spokesmen, that someone must have the maturity in the black community to say that these riots are riots and they cannot, by any stretch of the imagination, be made into people's rebellion. And I think in this moment, this is the moment for, and Roy has always had the courage to call a spade, if I may use a racist euphemism, to say that you can't make a people's rebellion out of riot. There's no way within the realm of morality looting can be justified. It is illegitimate, it is wanton, it is dishonest. And even though these are black teenagers predominantly, that's all it is. It's hoodlumism, and we, amongst the other people in our larger community, must say also that it is wrong and it is deplorable, and the nation cannot digest it.
For a while, it seemed as though nothing could quell the outbreak. But the pleas for nonviolence and restraint continued.
Know what you're talking about. Be qualified. Be ready. Then you don't have a problem. Be ready. Know what you're doing.
Singer James Brown.
In Augusta, Georgia, I used to shine shoes on the steps of radio station WRDW. I think we started 3 cents. And we went to 5 and 6. Never did get to a dime. But today, I own that radio station. You know what that is? That's black power. Right here. It's not in violence. It's in knowing what you're talking about. Being ready. Now, I say to you because I'm your brother. I know where it's at. I've been there. I'm not using from imagination. I'm talking from experience. Get off the street. Go home. Take your families home. Look at television. Listen to the radio. Or listen to some James Brown records. But get out the street. Let's go back to our normal functions. Another thing I'd like to say. Don't burn. Give the kids a chance to learn. Don't terrorize, but organize.
The greatest tribute that we can pay to this man whom we all
Walter
love
Pointroy of the Southern Christian Leadership
is
Conference.
to handle our grief in these early hours of crisis in the spirit of nonviolence that he would have had us to handle it in. And so I appeal to you tonight to handle your grief and to respond to this tragic event in silence and in nonviolence. I appeal to you to remain in your homes tonight and to encourage your friends and relatives too, to pray for a spreading of the spirit of this great man whom we have loved so much and whom we all love. The greatest tribute, I repeat, in the name of God and the name of Martin Luther King Jr. that we can make is to handle our grief in the spirit of nonviolence. Those who respond violently in their grief do Dr. King and his memory a dishonor. Please respond to this appeal.
The destruction and the theft was done, and those that did grieve picked up the pieces. Throughout the city, churches were set up as emergency centers to distribute food, clothing, and shelter to those in need. With the help of government agencies and private organizations, they started to rebuild. Appeals were issued to citizens outside the troubled areas for money and assistance. The people responded generously. President Johnson led the nation in calling for unity and understanding.
I ask every citizen to reject the blind violence that has struck Dr. King, who lived by nonviolence. I pray that his family can find comfort in the memory of all he tried to do for the land he loved so well. I have just conveyed the sympathy of Ms. Johnson, myself, to his widow, Mrs. King. I know that every American of goodwill joins me in mourning the death of this outstanding leader and in praying for peace and understanding throughout this land. We can achieve nothing by lawlessness and divisiveness among the American people. It's only by joining together and only by working together can we continue to move toward equality and fulfillment for all of our people.
In the shadow of a flag that for the first time was lowered to half-mast for a private citizen, some had proven by smoke they had already forgotten him. But for every thief, there were millions who mourned. And beyond the smoke, they were king.
Almost from the day it was founded in 1848, the folks across the bay in San Francisco have been making jokes about Oakland. There's no there, poetess Gertrude Stein is supposed to have said. Well, the jokes may live on, but Oakland is no longer that faceless other city across the bay. Today, California's fourth largest city is a booming center of industry, commerce, art, and culture. But Oakland's new glamour and prosperity are not shared equally by all of its citizens. Nearly half of the city's population is non-white, and many are poor. They do not patronize the symphony or the museum. They don't use the Coliseum or the airport very much, nor do they hold their share of the jobs created by Oakland's new industry, port, and transportation facilities.
Hey you old funky Oakland town. How come you're such a cold and brutal city? And your town marching this posse ain't got no shame, and most of all, they just ain't got no pity.
Most of Oakland's black and brown citizens came here from the South during World War II, lured by recruiters for government and private industry to work in shipyards and defense plants. After the war, the shipyards closed and many factories moved to the suburbs, leaving most non-white workers behind. Technology put still more workers on the unemployment and welfare lines, where they were joined by newly dispossessed farmers and farm workers forced off the land by the growth of agribusiness. During the 50s, Oakland became a stagnant, seething ghetto of impoverished blacks and Chicanos, surrounded by the white affluence of the Oakland Hills and suburban Alameda County. To contain the misery and violence of the ghetto, Oakland's all-white police department earned a reputation for head-knocking brutality that has left a well-remembered legacy of bitterness in the minds and hearts of many who lived in that time and place.
I was growing up in the late 30s and early 40s. At that time, the police department was perceived as brutal, and for the most part, there was extreme fear on the part of black people in West Oakland at that time when the police would ever come into the community. I remember one specific situation where several young blacks were being apprehended by the police, or they went into their homes to pick them up for some alleged crime. And I remember one particular police officer kicking one of the young people who couldn't have been more than 13 or 14 years old. I think that the Black Panthers raised a very significant issue, and that was the brutality of the police when they came into the black community.
The police were in the same position as most of government, not being in fact responsive to citizens' needs. In our recruit schools, we inculcated for many years, in my opinion, in our policemen what I would characterize as a gung-ho law enforcement orientation. We taught them laws of arrest, search and seizure, and patrol division, patrol procedure practices, which could only result in an officer oriented in a very narrow law enforcement way. So as we went about in this police department as an operational style in the 50s and some part of the 60s, of stopping people on various pretexts. This is a mandate, as it were, from the police department itself. We incurred very, very bad relationships with our community.
Today, there is a whole new relationship developing between the people of Oakland's ghettos and the police. Police officials hold regular meetings in the community, and they are well received.
This is one of the greatest things I've seen in Oakland in my 30 years here. I never thought I'd see today. Back in 47, 48, I could see policemen come and sit down and let you criticize you.
It's our responsibility to get out in that community, and we'll be here if you want us. And I'm here, quite frankly, to assure you that those men that you see sitting here and the men that work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the Oakland Police Department will be striving to achieve a goal that they're going to take a humanistic approach to policing. I don't care how frustrated our policemen happen to be because they're working hard, or how frustrated the citizen happens to be because he had to wait a long time for the policeman. I want to see every citizen treated with dignity.
I would say that there's been some tremendous change on the part of the police. I think they're moving away from the head-knocking, brutal physical approach and trying to be more public relations oriented, more community relations oriented, and hopefully more sensitive and liberal in their approach to modern law enforcement. And I see some dramatic effects because, as I said, I've been here when the case was juxtaposed in very hard terms.
In a moment, a look at how things are going in Oakland these days between the people and the police.
Run, nigga, run. Black boy, don't you let the sun go down in this here town. Or you're gonna go to jail, boy. Or you might wind up getting dropped 6 feet down.
I joined the department in about 1965. It was very different from what it is now. I think we were a lot more aggressive then. I don't much care for the word harassment. I'd say there was a time we were a head-knocking department, yeah.
There are about 700 men in the Oakland Police Department. An overwhelming number are white, and most live in the suburbs, outside the city. Patrolman John Dixon joined the department after a stint with the Coast Guard. He grew up in Hollister, is a family man, and likes his work. To this extent, he is a typical Oakland policeman.
In the past, there was a quota system. It wasn't down on paper, but it did exist. You were expected to write a certain number of citations, and if you were a good policeman, you made a certain number of arrests. The quota system had to result in more aggressive policemen. They had to go out of their way to find certain things, and maybe they went a little far. We were trying to produce numbers in arrests and just about every way. What has happened is that Chief Gain said no more quota system, and there isn't any today. And that's fantastic. We spend more time today talking to people in a lot of situations where they probably would have gone to jail before. And I mean a lot of situations.
Prior to 1968, the mid-1960s at least, the philosophy of the department was to operate basically as a legalistic style of police department. Gradually, through the late 60s and into the early 70s, we began to change style of operation into what is frequently referred to now as a service style of police department.
George Hart is Oakland's new police chief. He assumed leadership of the department in October 1973 when Chief Charles Gain retired after 27 years on the force.
The change came about because it had to come about to be responsive to the community. The community was saying to us, I think, that we want a police organization which services the entire community in a fair and impartial manner. And we want a police organization in which we can have confidence.
First, we'd like to get you to think as well as you can about the way you looked at police work and a way of operating before you even started recruit training.
Oakland's new policing style is a product of an unusual collaboration between the Oakland Police and a group of social scientists. One of these scientists is J. Douglas Grant, former chief of research for the California prison system. Grant and his colleagues had been remarkably successful in helping convicted criminals overcome their own violent behavior through a process of self-study. In 1969, they convinced police officials that by helping violence-prone policemen study their own behavior, they could reverse the upward spiral of violence between the police and the people of Oakland. Former Chief Charles Gain agreed it was worth a try, and they went to work under a grant from the federal government. Today, the self-study process is carried on by the department's conflict management section.
At the time, there was no regard to the quality of the work.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, basically a numbers game, and nobody...
One idea that developed early in the self-study process was that of tape recording actual confrontations between Oakland police officers and potentially violent citizens. The recordings have proved invaluable in understanding how to avoid conflict and are now used in training new police officers in the art of discretionary decision-making.
A police officer probably has the broadest powers of discretion in carrying out his functions than any other citizen. So what we're going to do today is sit down and listen to two patrolmen as they intervene in a family dispute. We're not saying that everything that they do in this tape is the right way to do it, but they made certain decisions throughout this tape, and we're going to sit down and critique these bit by bit. This is an actual street incident. These are real policemen and real people. Some individual officers, when they come into the recruit academy, feel that they're coming in to be trained to be a tremendous crime fighter. They don't realize that that's only a portion of their training, how to combat crime. That a lot of it is going to be in how to deal with people, how to solve people's everyday problems, how to meet the everyday problems of the community.
All right, then. I mean, unless you're going to arrest me, arrest me. If you ain't going to arrest me, man, then I advise you just get on your way.
I would kind of like to talk about it first before we...
Say, look, look, man, that's my wife. I'm her husband, man. You ain't got nothing to do with it. You understand me? You understand me? You ain't got nothing to do with it.
Down, man.
Don't tell me to cool down, man.
What we're trying to provide or promote is an officer who does his job, does it well, does it efficiently, who does in fact produce, but who at the same time is a very humanistic individual, who understands his community, who understands himself and his department. Okay. He's told you in probably 20 different ways what the problem is. Does anybody know? One of the officers already has identified it.
He wants him back because she doesn't want him back.
I'm not telling them not to use force, because there are those instances and those times when they must use force. But also what I'm saying is that there's all different ways to establish your authority as a police officer. You can establish authority by humor. You can establish it by showing concern. Pure physical force is not an absolute. That's not the only way one controls a situation.
What I need is a woman, man, but I can't seem to find myself a woman, though. I'm looking for it in this one right here, but I can't seem to find one. I've been getting drunk almost every night since I've been home, you understand?
What's the problem? He's screaming it to you.
It seems like it might be sex.
Okay, why didn't you say it earlier? It's a very simple thing. Until he started screaming. Plain old sex.
But the Oakland police do more than just talk about violence prevention in their academy classes. Each time an officer must use force in the performance of his duty, it's reported to a computer. And periodically, the computer selects out those officers with an unusually high number of such critical incidents. They are then invited to appear before a panel of fellow officers who review in meticulous detail his handling of situations that resulted in violence.
We're asking you to be very candid with us. We're asking you to admit your mistakes. Every guy on this panel has made some of the same mistakes that you've made. None of us here that are perfect. What we're trying to do is find better ways of doing things.
The Action Review panel is both voluntary and confidential. No record is kept and no disciplinary action is involved. An officer may sit for as long as 8 hours while his peers question and analyze his actions, his judgments, his personal attitudes, even his mannerisms. Yet since the panels were started in 1971, no man has refused to participate. The moderator of the Action Review panels is Officer Bob Crawford of the Conflict Management Section. In this case, the first ever filmed, the man in the hot seat is Officer Bernie Gerhardt.
Details. Complainant states suspect had an illegitimate child 3 weeks ago but refuses to stay home and care for the child. Suspect would not talk to ROs and had to be physically subdued to be taken into custody.
Okay, what happened?
I don't remember it.
You realize that things like this are official records that can be subpoenaed into court, and you could be put on a stand, being sued, and somebody could hit you with a report just like that, And like you say, 6 months later you might remember it. 2 years later you'd be looking at the guy and say, well, I had to physically subdue a 17-year-old girl who had only been out of a hospital for 3 weeks after having given birth to a baby, and I don't remember a thing about it. It could color you looking very, very poorly.
He has sat on panels before, but I think it struck him being kind of different to be sitting in that seat rather than in one of the other seats.
You could have had your head blown off with your own gun.
What if you had a machine gun? I don't know.
All right,
You'd have killed both of us.
Listen to what he's saying. This is the
I
thing.
am.
You could have had your head blown off with your own gun.
I know that.
You can't handle two guys properly. I don't care how great you are.
In his case, he realized he had a small man's complex. He kept thinking that he had to take the first affirmative action in an arrest situation to overcome the small man thing, which he doesn't have to do, because he works very effectively.
I might be wrong about what the whole object of these panels are, but when a person starts showing up with one of these after another, we're supposed to look into why. And I just wanted to ask the question, is he one of these men? He's not as big in stature as some of us, and it's appeared in about 4 or 5 of his remarks. I've talked to a lot of belly button and all that. Does he have a small man's complex, and he's taking it out on the kids? I just want to, you know.
Okay, the thing about the size, okay, when I first came on, I did have a size problem. I'm only 5'8", and I was 155 then, and I had what is commonly referred to as a small man complex. Right. I'm not defensive about it. I don't think I am.
Well, the fastest
I'm quicker to act because I'm aware of my size, especially when the person is bigger than me.
If there was no peer panel, if there was no one to call attention to the fact that an officer did have a particular problem, whether it be a small man complex or what have you, he would act this out in the street, and it would be misread. I have seen the real hard egg come up here, sit through the panel, totally reject the panel, yet go out and do a different job than he was doing before.
You pointed up some things that I was aware of as sort of halfway and didn't think it was really showing too much. It's good to have other people tell you something that you think you're already aware of, because then you know that other people are aware of it, and you'll make a better effort to control it or whatever, I think. Well, that panel was good. You picked a good panel. There isn't an officer here that I don't respect. And from that aspect, I think it's good. If there were a bunch of turkeys sitting here, I'd have left a long time ago. And you'd have heard about it in the locker room.
The suspect is considered 5150, should be considered armed and dangerous. Both are wanted for conspiracy and forgery.
Since the inception of the Action Review panel and other self-study techniques, there has been a dramatic drop in the number of conflicts between the police and the people of Oakland. Resistance to arrest and assaults on police officers dropped as much as 30% in a single year, while citizen complaints against police officers have been cut in half. But policemen are traditionalists. Many still admire the ideal of the super cop, the tough, resourceful, and courageous lawman who always catches the crook. And some of Oakland's finest are still uncomfortable with their department's new style and philosophy.
There's basically two parts to the job. One part is enforcing the law, and the second part is let's say, helping people. Our relationships with people are a whole lot better than they used to be. But as far as enforcement of the law, we're slacking off, and that's part of the job.
John Dixon works in the hardcore ghetto of West Oakland. The neighborhood is very poor and almost exclusively black. It is not an easy beat for a white policeman working alone.
You've got to be realistic. Your child may go through some more as a result of my talking to her.
I don't think he can go through no more than any other kid that's on the street, too.
I am of two minds. The move has been good. We're dealing with the people in a much better frame of mind. The results are much better. When I go into people's houses, it's You don't get as much of a hassle as you used to do. And yet at the same time, you're still respected as policemen. The public accepts us more than they did before. I find that in most cases I get a lot more cooperation. And you find that more people are at least willing to give you information on the side than they were before. More people are inclined to give you a helping hand, where before I think very few people were.
Burglary?
My car hasn't been involved in no burglary.
That's what I
I just
understand.
came from my girlfriend's house.
I remember when I first came on that if you did make a car stop, you immediately got a crowd. Today, you not only don't normally gather the crowds, but when you do gather a crowd, it's the people don't tend to be as hostile. The quality of the arrests we're making now are much better, no doubt about it. But I think that we're getting kind of lethargic. We're sitting back. We're accepting the fact that we're a service-orientated department, which I think a person is inclined to think that we're at the beck and call of people. And I think that's what a lot of us are doing. We're just sitting back waiting to be called. Unless you want to run them here. We're more community relations orientated, more of a service-type department. And I think at the expense of enforcement, law enforcement.
The so-called service style is not per se a weak approach to the problem at all. If anything, it's a stronger approach. You can have an effective, alert police department which does in fact engage in heads-up police work, aggressive patrol. That's what the community wants. That's why we exist.
Would you like the department to go back to the head-knocking, legalistic department that it used to be?
No. I don't think anybody wants it to go back that far. Not that far.
Why?
It would just create the same old problems we had before, a hostile society, problems on the simplest of things, just talking to people on the street. I don't think we'd have as much success if we went back to that.
I believe, probably more than I believe anything, that the officers in this department do in fact want to do and do in fact accomplish a very capable level of policing in the Oakland community. I believe that they support totally the concept that any police organization can only operate in a fair and lawful manner.
Do you think you have to make a choice between community relations and good enforcement?
No, I think they can work hand in hand. It's obvious they can.
Hey you, Mr. Police. You better heed the people warning, cause the handwriting is on the wall. Hey you, Mr. Police Chief. You better heed the people warning, cause the handwriting is on the wall. So have fun while you can. Just like the wall of Jericho, you're bound to fall.
The shoes on. I didn't even know my son was in the game until after he passed. He was only 16. To me, he was still a baby. I had a memory lost. People that I had known for years, I couldn't remember who they were. I couldn't go back to work for at least 3 weeks. You know, people would question me about different things, and I didn't want to deal with it. I would cry all the time. It's just your whole life, you know, it's just turned upside down. None of them showed any remorse. Next year, 3 of them would get out. They plea bargain. Some of them got 7 years. One of the girls that cleaned up the blood at the apartment that he had got beat up at, she's out. The leader of the gang got 15 to 30. The one guy that had his gym shoes on, he got 12 years. No, he got 16 years. And a guy that took his clothes off and burned them, he got 12 years. So they all got time.